Welcome everyone to the World Sustainable Development Summit 2022. The theme of this summit this year is towards a resilient planet, ensuring sustainable and equitable future. So we have esteemed guests, speakers, and panelists who've joined here today for the thematic track on EU REI, European Resource Efficiency Initiative Phase 2. And the title here is Enabling Partnerships to Promote Standards and Business Best Practices on Resource Efficiency. So with this in background, I now request Dr. Suneel Pandey, who is the Senior Fellow and Director of the Environment and Waste Management Division at TERI, to start this session and give his opening remarks. So,
thank you, Meher, and very good morning to all of you. Let me, on behalf of European Union, GIZ, WSDS working team, TERI, and all our other sponsors, welcome you all, not only the eminent panelists, keynote speakers, but also all the participants who have taken time to join us in this session. As you know, circular economy has become a key element on not only extraction but production processes, and we no longer can look at linear economy because of material scarcity, and we have to, as a policy option, shift to circular economy principle. And resource efficiency, as also being adopted in India, becomes an important tool for implementing circular economy measures. Apart from issues like remanufacturing, refurbishing, material recovery, recycling, in that order. But resource efficiency in production processes certainly will fast track adoption to circular economy. And with these few words, since we're a little late in the session, I'll again thank you all to be here and welcome you all on behalf of organizing committee, and hand it over back to Meher. Meher, back to you.
Dr. Suneel, thank you so much for your opening remarks and for setting the context. We now have, we would now like to request Shri Sudhir Kumar, who is the advisor at NITI Aayog, to please give his special address. So.
Yeah, thank you, Meher, and thank you, Dr. Pandey. I am Sudhir this side. And you know, it's quite a long engagement of EU REI on the circular economy and the NITI Aayog. That first of the very few important initiatives through the sectoral reports that took place, I think 4 or 5 years back, and later on led to the report on the strategy on the circular efficiency also in 2017. So all these engagements have been very productive in the first phase, and the work that was on the national resource efficiency policy side, a lot of discussions happened around 2019 and thereafter. That provided something a very good grounding for taking up the additional initiatives in a very concrete fashion. That NITI Aayog started last year in the form of 11 committees that not only included the ongoing work that was happening, but we added new areas also. Some of those areas were quite new in a way, like the solar panel waste. That's still not happening, but we are getting geared towards that, lithium ion batteries, and say the gypsum that was not attempted earlier. And these sectors, there's no very specific, some of the areas, not very specific need for the EPR or the very strong policy, and many of these initiatives has to be business driven. So it has been a very mixed kind of approach where we feel that these will be the difficult areas and need more attention and involvement and some policy instruments. So these are the few initiatives, and the e-waste, ELV side, a lot of developments have happened and quite the mature policies, their framework are there and the regulations are there. But while discussing all these in the committees, we came across that there are quite a number of cross-cutting issues that goes beyond the scope of the ministries and sectors, and those are the still issues not the issues that are part of the whole ecosystem, so that some very effective value chains around the circular economy can grow. So these all, again, cross-cutting issues are highlighted in the 2022-23 budget speech by the Honorable Finance Minister, that highlights that the sea transition is expected to enhance productivity, create opportunities for new businesses, and the transition will be supported by the public policies on regulation, EPR framework, and innovation facilitation. So these are the kind of cross-cutting issue we are flagging, and these again, this transition will be addressed through the issues of filling up the infrastructure gaps, reverse logistics wherever the public involvement is critical for that. Some areas of technology upgradation will be also required, and India's specific informal sector issues. So that's very much present in many of the value chains. They also need to be taken care of, integrated in proper fashion, and need to be kind of hand-holded also, so that the kind of livelihood issues and their larger societal role is also not missed out while carrying out these transitions. And I see that, the last year, 2020, the EU-India Joint Declaration on the Resource Efficiency and Circular Economy is very much aligned to what the current thinking is. This dialogue also, the declaration also emphasized the dialogue, cooperation, and advocacy on the resource efficiency, circular economy. And not only it goes to very specifics like design, planning, implementation, promotion, dissemination of policies, strategies, technologies, and in addition, the cooperation on the research and innovation. And further to augment that, the strategic exchange on best practices and available technologies. So there's a lot of convergence, what we find that the current work that's going on in this space. So all these in the second phase, I think, will be very much useful and kind of path breaking for setting up the real, at the implementation phase. So these are the things, and these are the issues are very well flagged, and the kind of directions that different sectors can take up, and new sectors that can be added. They are very kind of articulated, and they are well articulated, and things are, in terms of action plans also, they are laid down. So these are the broad policy perspective, and where NITI Aayog thinks that what issues need to be taken care of in the little bit just immediate or next phase of the circular economy. So these are the few thoughts that I to share with you people, so that we can align and converse around these themes and areas to further go along.
Mr. Sudhir Kumar, thank you so much for your keynote address, for opening the session. As you have laid the context, we would now like to move to the EU side, and I request Ms. Astrid Schumacher, Director, DG Environment, to please give her special address for the session.
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back at WSSD. Maybe to start with, I'd like to take us back 1 year. So almost exactly 1 year ago, on 18th February 2021, the United Nations Environment Programme released its seminal report, Making Peace with Nature. And bringing together then the latest scientific evidence, the report made a compelling case, and I quote the UN Secretary General here, that our war on nature has left the planet broken. But at the same time, this report also provided a blueprint for addressing the 3 planetary emergencies we are facing: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And it does so by showing that these 3 crises interact with each other and have a common cause. The wasteful production and consumption of energy and natural resources is behind all these problems. And that means, of course, that we have, with our initiative to work together on circular economy and resource efficiency, we really have a chance to address these 3 crises, planetary emergencies, together. And we are in a unique moment. Governments around the world have started mobilizing several trillion euros to recover from the COVID pandemic. This is, as I said, a unique opportunity to reset our economies, make them cleaner, less wasteful, and put them on a path forward towards the Sustainable Development Agenda, the Paris Agreement, and the new biodiversity goals to be set later this year. Now, in the EU, we aim at a resilient and regenerative economy that reverses climate change and environmental degradation and minimizes pollution. We're talking here about an economic model compatible with the long-term interests of future generations and that promotes resource efficiency, circular economy, protects biodiversity, fights against pollution, is about clean transport, sustainable food systems, and clean energy. Now, that's a lot on our plate. And if this is more to be just than just blah, 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 what this actually means is a radical shift, a fundamental transition. And a transition that must succeed, but can only succeed if government departments work together to create clear rules and put the right incentives in place, if business is on board, if consumers can play their part. For us in the EU, the European Green Deal is our compass for a green recovery with sustainability and social justice at its heart. And it's about turning these environmental challenges into socio-economic opportunities. And this is also why we don't think of the European Green Deal as an environment policy or a policy for climate, but rather as a transformative policy for our whole economic model, from agriculture to energy to transport and construction. It requires cross-policy, cross-sectoral solutions, so the famous whole-of-government approach. And of course, it can not afford to leave anyone behind if it wants to succeed. And I think this is a vision we share very much with India. Now, the European Green Deal is clear that tackling the climate and biodiversity crisis will not be possible without changing the way we produce and consume. And that is why the transition to a more circular economy on which we have embarked is pretty central to the European Green Deal. And we are now currently implementing already our second Circular Economy Action Plan, which addresses 4 key areas. First, sustainable product policy. Second, the empowerment of consumers. Third, the reduction of waste, for example, by making all packaging on the EU market reusable or recyclable by 2030 and minimizing EU exports of waste. I'll come back to that. And fourth, concrete actions in key sectors. And again, they will sound familiar to you because we're working together on many of them, talking here about electronics and ICT, batteries and vehicles, plastics, textiles, constructions, and building, food, water, and nutrients. Now, under this second Circular Economy Action Plan, which was launched almost 2 years ago, the European Commission has notably adopted a proposal for new regulation on sustainable batteries, which is a comprehensive framework addressing the whole life cycle of batteries, currently being discussed by the legislature, the European Parliament, the member states. A proposal to update the rules on persistent organic pollutants in waste, and fairly recently a proposal last year in November for new rules on waste shipment to reduce the EU's external pollution footprint and avoid that we are exporting our waste challenges to third countries. Under this proposal, waste exports to non-OECD countries will only be allowed if third countries are willing to receive certain wastes and are able to manage them sustainably. And EU companies that export waste outside the EU should ensure that the facilities receiving their waste are subject to an independent audit showing that they manage this waste in an environmentally sound manner. And we consider waste trafficking actually as one of the most serious forms of environmental crime, and this is why we think this additional action is now necessary. But we're moving on with the implementation of the Circular Economy Action Plan. We're now actually in a crucial phase to deliver on its main milestone. And the main milestone is about making sustainable products the norm in the European Union. In just a few weeks' time, we're going to present a Sustainable Products Initiative. This initiative will revise our old Eco-Design Directive and propose additional legislative measures, as appropriate, to make sure that products placed on the EU market are more sustainable, are more durable, reusable, repairable, recyclable, are energy efficient, and contain fewer harmful chemicals. We're also about to put out a legislative proposal on empowering consumers in the green transition. to improve their information about products' environmental characteristics, so they can make informed choices and be part of this. And we are simultaneously about to launch a new EU strategy for sustainable textiles to address the sector's environmental impacts, while at the same time ensuring a competitive recovery from the crisis. Now, so much for the EU. A strong push towards circularity based on numerous scientific analyses that show us that moving to the circular economy will be crucial for reaching our environment and climate ambitions while creating jobs and competitiveness. And in India as well. And our colleague from NITI Aayog has already said that the potential benefits of the circular economy transition are clear. A range of studies have shown the huge potential of circular economy policies to mitigate negative environment externalities, create GDP growth by reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as pollution, and thus leading to both health and economic benefits for Indian citizens. Transitioning to a more resource-efficient and circular economy contributes to a whole range of Indian priorities, such as self-reliance, jobs and poverty alleviation, industrial transition, pollution reduction, climate actions, and of course the sustainability of India's rich natural resource base. And it just feels like the right thing for India with your long tradition of working and living in harmony with nature. So it is increasingly also recognized at the highest level in India, and as shown by Prime Minister Modi's intervention in Davos last month, that who referred clearly to move away from the linear take, make, dispose economy to a circular economy. And also his steady commitment to phasing out single-use plastics are testament to that. And this is why we're so happy to see that NITI Aayog has also worked very much with us, and the growing attention to circular economy has led to the establishment by NITI Aayog of circular economy committees in different sectoral ministries. And the intervention today in the panel of a representative of the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, I think, illustrates that circular economy is no longer seen as an environmental topic, but as an industrial and socio-economic priority. So there's a lot of common thinking in the EU and India has also been a major partner in our global efforts to promote circular economy and resource efficiency. Our joint commitment is underpinned by our well-established cooperation in this area in the past years. And we did launch last year here at the WSSD the second phase of our joint resource efficiency initiative. And we're pursuing this excellent cooperation also as regards supporting the circular economy committees I already mentioned, and supporting the implementation of India's resource efficiency and circular economy strategies. The new EU-India Resource Efficiency and Circular Economy Partnership, established in July 2020, has also started to be rolled out, and it should provide scope for increased exchanges between EU and Indian counterparts on standards and business best practices, procurement, traceability in supply chains, with skills and capacities. And our member states are getting together and gearing up and pooling expertise together in a true Team Europe approach. So we're looking forward to mesh our collective experience on our side and with Indian ambition and creativity. We will soon have our next working group on environment, and we hope we can take stock of progress made and give a further steer to this work. And maybe to conclude, just to say it is good to see EU and India also step forward together in global efforts to combat wasteful production and consumption. Last year, the EU launched together with UNEP and UNIDO, the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, GACERE. India has joined this endeavor together with 14 other countries. And in a few weeks, we hope to see the launch of negotiations on a global agreement on plastics at the 5th session of the UN Environment Assembly. 140 countries are now calling for such an agreement, and we'd like to acknowledge India's ambition to also take global action on plastics. And we're looking forward to further discuss with our Indian counterparts, actually next time tomorrow morning, how we can synergize the Indian and the EU efforts and the efforts of the sponsors of this resolution to really make a difference on the ground and find a common position before and during the year. And lastly, let me flag the importance of joining forces on circular economy in the run-up to India's presidency of the G20 in 2023, notably by implementing the G20 Resource Efficiency Dialogue Roadmap for 2021 to 23, which holds such promise. We would refer particularly here to sectors of relevance like textiles, electronics, and plastics, and to some more horizontal technical enabling work on value retention processes, design for circularity, standards, changed custody, labels, procurements, or extended producer responsibilities, all areas where India can really put its imprint on the G20 and steer the global economy towards greater resource efficiency. Let me stop here. An incredibly rich and busy agenda, but one I think that holds great promise for our environment and our societies. Thank you very much.
Ms. Astrid Schumacher, thank you so much for your special address. Both you and Mr. Sudhir have from NITI Aayog and you from EU as a Director DG Environment have set the context for the EU-India partnerships needed for mainstreaming circular economy and transitioning towards resource-efficient economy. So with this in background, with your context which has been set, we will now move on towards our panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. Suneel Pandey. Just a few housekeeping rules. I would request only the speakers who are giving their inputs to keep their mics on. And for the participants, please put your questions in the chat box, and I will share the same with the speakers and the moderator for further deliberation. So with that, Dr. Suneel Pandey, to you.
Thank you very much, Meher, and thank you very much also to Sudhir Kumar ji and Ms. Astrid Schumacher. It was very interesting deliberation on covering the issues relating to Circular Economy Action Plan and the progress which India is making. And I'll not kind of repeat everything, but it has opened door to very interesting issues like solar PV, which will become a problem in future after the installations start becoming waste. Storage batteries, which Astrid indicated that European Union now has certainly taken an informed decision on how designs will be regulated in future. And also what was indicated also by Mr. Sudhir Kumar on informal sector, because India is characterized by informal sector in manufacturing process and also in material sourcing process. So how do circular economy action plan takes care of informal sector? And in the session, we have three very distinguished speakers, each representing a very specific sector. Ms. Rachna Arora, who is advisor for the EU RE&CE process and has been involved with the process since inception, would be our first panelist. And what I suggest is that all the panelists give their remark for 10 minutes, approximately 10 minutes in the session. And then we'll see if there are any questions from the participants, and I'll direct them to our panelists. So we'll begin with Ms. Rachna Arora. Rachna, all yours. And in case if any of you have a presentation, you can share it. The sharing rights is given to all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey, and yeah, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be at the WSDS, and I think having this discussion at this point is really important because, as we just heard from Dr. Sudhir Kumar and from Astrid as well, there are a lot of global developments which are progressing and, of course, shaping up. And how does that translate into the entire increased momentum, the political will on both sides? I think that's what we are just looking forward to. And really, like, it was very, very exciting over last few weeks when we heard the budget speech from our finance minister, which actually mentioned some of these sectors and the approach that NITI Aayog is taking on and across on industrial symbiosis, reverse logistics, EPR. So I think this actually brings in a lot of needed momentum, especially in India when we are gearing towards the G20 presidency as well. So yeah, I think I would just like to largely highlight the role of EU RE&CE, which we have been doing since 2017, and how do we see our role in terms of enabling these partnerships further. So first of all, I would like to just highlight one of the areas which is around the need of innovation or need for innovation. Because if we see, we have been working with NITI Aayog committees, some of them, and reading across through these circular economy action plans which have been brought forward, there is a realization about this need and mechanisms which looks at building up the entire culture of repair, reuse, product life extension, which has been existing in India. And I think since the action plans come through the ministries, they also bring forward not just the work with the informal sector or keeping it informal, but devising solutions which bring the entire culture of repair, reuse, and product extension or the design criteria into the action plans itself, which I think will create a lot of momentum which is needed. And as well, when it comes to the exchange with the EU businesses, since there has been a bit of progress when it comes to, say, EPR or innovation-led business models, the technical know-how, Astrid just mentioned about the sustainable product policy and those discussions. So I think there we see a lot of relevance of exchange between the two countries, and of course devising solutions which are more inclusive as well. Coming back to the other issue, I think which we just heard, like the approach that we have taken in the past has been a very, like in terms of the studies we have assessed, like the sectors we have undertaken, most of them are the ones which Mr. Sudhir Kumar just mentioned. The resource intensity across these sectors, whether it's electronic waste, whether it is plastic, whether it is iron and steel, aluminum and all, there is of course a very needed value chain approach which has to come across the variety of stakeholders that exist, and of course where do we see the role for policy innovation across. So this has been our approach, and we're really happy to see that it is going into building up the circular economy action plans with each of the ministry. If I just give one example, and I think I'm sure Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee would highlight it, the move that NITI is taking on coming up with subscription services is actually a very, very interesting move to just look at that how we are talking about the relevance of other elements of circular economy and not just improving recyclability, not just talking about recycling infrastructure, but also looking at an entire upstream approach, which is where it's really welcoming to see the government action around this kind of a transition move as well. On the other actors, we also feel we have been part of a lot of discussions happening with the private sector. So where we see innovation led by the industry, largely when it comes to plastics or on secondary resource utilization, recycled content, a lot of startups working already on the space of traceability. So I think those approaches are also coming up at a very larger scale, but of course it still just comes up of how do you enable this action further, and of course the government sets in the right context, because you just need to move these industrial alliances. And for instance, the CII and WWF 1.5 years back launching the India Plastic Pact. I think these things just make out very clearly the push towards circular economy innovation, which is coming across also from the private sector, which is quite a lot needed. The third element, and I think this is where what Astrid was just mentioning, the role of implementation, identifying the scope of innovation, and of course just moving ahead towards setting up business models which can be implemented across. So the approach that we have taken is to, of course, enable a bit of an action, not just with the ministries at the national level, but also move down to the state governments. And they're, of course, trying to see an approach that can become something that the state government could implement with the right set of measures that they can identify, have consultative process, set up task forces, set up committees, and of course enable some kind of budget allocations to implement some of these actions. So we're working closely in Goa with the state RE strategy, which was launched in 2020. And then, of course, we are also working with a very recent work that we have started is with the state government of Rajasthan, where we are supporting to do a waste recycling park. Together with TERI, we are undertaking this work. And I think this is going to be a very interesting approach, a lot of challenges to design this kind of a waste recycling park for the state of Rajasthan. But I think what is very innovative and where we see bringing in best practices from the EU as well is to apply the different kind of sectors together into one approach. So kind of undertaking the approach where you can actually think about the industrial symbiosis and getting a agency like Rajasthan State Pollution Control Board also just shows a shift from the mindset where it's not just about compliance, it is very command and control led, but also moving to an approach which enables action for the industry to come up with solutions which are looking at industrial symbiosis and designing sustainability criteria, designing solutions which could move towards circularity. So this we see as a good opportunity, and there are a lot of recycling companies, there are automobile ELV facilities and solar panels, a lot of other material intensive sectors who would be visiting and would be looking at setting up their recycling facilities in this park as well. So yeah, I think this is what we are trying to do, at least in terms of enabling some of the actions as well. The other role and scope, I think, which we also see, especially the way NITI Aayog is designing the National Circular Economy mission, so we just see the role for, say, for instance, the EU Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, something like that as a best practice, because that actually offers lessons. It actually sets up the entire the stakeholder platform, bringing in different perspectives, bringing in the network of networks, and where I think a lot of sectoral activities and the cross alliances across, whether it's standards. We did a workshop also on standards with Sense and Elect, and I think there is a lot of interest across different ministries, across different industrial lobbies to actually initiate action and bring out a common set of. So here we see that something like this exchange best practice together with the EU Circular Economy Platform could offer a kind of an approach where the existing initiatives at different levels, at the local, state, national, regional level, could actually just see enabling action. So that would be, I think, one of the area where we could just foresee some action also from our side. And thirdly, I think what is very important is the capacities that we're talking about, which is where I think a lot of these committees have reflected. We actually had, together with our key ministry, which is the Ministry of Environment and Forest, we actually designed a tailor-made, specific course on resource efficiency and circular economy. Now, this toolkit needs to be adapted to different sectors that we're talking about, to different needs of the stakeholders that is, and it has to, of course, get customized. So here we would play largely the role with the Ministry of Environment to actually disseminate this toolkit forward and maybe just make it more accessible to different sets of actors into the value chain as well. And as I said, customize it further as well. Lastly, just one point to mention, I think with the G20 presidency, the RE dialogue as a platform, we have actually been following up the progress as well across different countries, and with the EU also we've been having this exchange. We would actually like to see and scope out further exchange collaborations. We are going to initiate some work with CII as well, especially on the B20 dialogues as well, because as we mentioned that there is a private sector momentum also which is required on building up this entire exchange, whether it's value retention processes or design for circularity. And as Astrid already mentioned and pointed out, on a lot of these the deliberations that has been going across the past presidencies, and we would like to focus on the areas of interest which the Indian government has, whether it's ELV, whether it's e-waste, plastics, and textiles, for instance, and design kind of the exchange and collaborations further. So yeah, I think that's largely what I had to say, and I would like to hand it over back to Dr. Pandey.
Thank you, Rishna. And if I can kind of pick up few keywords from your deliberations, looking at need for financial support, need for policy support in mainstreaming circular economy, need for standard operating procedures, and the toolkit which the initiative has prepared, need to customize that to various sectors. These are certainly very important issues, and also, I mean, I must thank Goa State through EU RE&CE initiative that they are the first state basically in India to adopt and frame resource efficiency policy for the state. I hope other states also would soon start looking at it. The next speaker for the session is Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee. So Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee is Director, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, and he has been dealing with electronic waste issues since the issues became important, not much before that. And He also, I mean, as his affiliation with the ministry, he represents an important sector, as also mentioned by Astrid, where we are looking at designs which mandate easy dismantling, easy recycling, and also use of less and less hazardous material. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee for his deliberations. Dr. Chatterjee.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey. This is my pleasure to share some of the activity around circular economy from our ministry. Good morning to our European friends and good afternoon to India. Actually, as Mr. Sudhir Kumar must have mentioned that NITI Aayog was pushing the circular economy from last year. The 11 vertical has been identified. When e-waste vertical has been given to us for deliberation, finding out a suitable action point. So before that also NITI Aayog has attempted to address the circular resource efficiency issues along with EU RE&CE program and come out a strategy paper where main recommendation they have found that the informal sector, vast informal sector requires a proper skill set, adequate tools, technology, so that the resource efficiency can be enhanced. Another report came in 2019 September, which actually trying to see what is the level of rare earth available in e-waste, and they are actually interested to find the strengthening the recycling of e-waste to address the needs of rare earth materials for strategic sector and our economic development. So that report found that we require a dedicated zone for recycling or eco park, require establishment of eco park in the country. With this genesis, this circular economy action plan our ministry has developed on e-waste and handed over July 2021 to NITI Aayog. And from November 2021, NITI Aayog asked us to initiate the action on various identified action plans. So majority of the action plan, if you can mention, is basically, as you all know, typically in our country, we are concentrating on end of life of e-waste, which will actually the management of e-waste, recycling of that, and repairing of that e-waste and all. But as Dr. Rachana mentioned, if you are not designing that the product in a green manner, or choice of material, if you can eliminate the hazardous materials. So from the design stage, you have to see how the product can be developed and how the sustainable use can be done, the product life can be enhanced. Then the recycling option. Then after recycling, how the secondary raw material are used in the for a virgin product. So entire that circle we should see, and there are a lot of intervention might be required in the entire process. So majority of the action plan, if I can mention, we thought that there should be a sustainable product policy in the country. And if you can define that, then green skill development and green public procurement should be the followed up action. Then the tracking of secondary raw material, encouraging manufacturers to use the secondary raw material. Then tracking of critical raw material. Then, of course, adopt the international standards that use SEN, SENLAC in entire value chain, adopt the internationally harmonized resource efficiency and circular economy. Of course, the already you are working that upgradation of informal sector with the indigenous technology, skill set and other things. Our ministry is doing for last almost one decade or 15 years almost. Create infrastructure with affordable technology, local machines, to ensure the resource efficiency and recycling. If you talk about the e-waste action plan, which NITI Aayog asked us to concentrate on, so there are 13 action points pertaining to our ministry. There are 17, mostly the regulatory framework. It is pertaining to Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, and there are few around 14 are NITI and other ministries are involved. And there are 12 more where MOF and NITI should work on. So with that genesis, if I can give you what NITI is doing now, we are trying to create few major pan-India level projects to address that action plan. One would be a awareness creation program. where actually if you see in our ministry has done a successful campaign on awareness greenie campaign from 2015 to 2020 with the 9 different stakeholders, school, college, RWA, informal sectors, manufacturers and others, this thing. So we have a dedicated website, www.greenie.gov.in, where you can get all the details. We have created a standard, international level standard, contents for each stakeholders. And we have created a Greenie champions also, the trainers, that their contacts are also available. Now, for sustaining that program, those information, those contents are being used regularly. Also, we have created through our NCRT a dedicated content for 7th standard to 9th standard students that is available in Diksha platform. So that was the our awareness creation activity of the ministry we already were doing. Similar fashion will be initiating another program that will be concentrating on circular economy and resource efficiency. Again, the same model, like participatory mode with the industry and association will be joining in that program. After that, there are for last almost 3 years, we are concentrating on skill development, because if you see around 2 million to 3 million informal sectors are working in the recycling business, but there is no adequate skill set. So our ministry has started skill development from the Northeast, 8 states of Northeast. And very recently, we started another program in Punjab, Haryana and Chandigarh. Another program was going on in Telangana and Andhra state. So similarly, entire country will be creating skill development program. We will now concentrate on informal sectors. After skill set, we will try to engage them to some of the MSME scheme, where this cluster formation can be adapted with the indigenous technology. Already we developed in CMAT, NML, CPED and other academic institutes. And these technologies are also in a technology readiness level of 5 to 6. So that technology can be given to those informal sector. Now, another policy push like sustainable product, we have formed a committee. They are deliberating on these issues. We'll be actually trying to see what is the recyclability of the product, what is the whether the product is suitable for disassembly, or how the product life can be enhanced. So those parts are being deliberated. We should have some policy paper. As Dr. Rachna was mentioned, another committee is working on a subscription or lease model of the products purchased to the government organization. So that is also in a final stage of shaping up. Apart from that, global study also will be trying to have some best practices, as Dr. Rachna also mentioned. We'll be trying to have a some proposal with maybe GIZ or EU REI to find out what is the global best practices on eco design, different technologies, and adoption of different type of standards and all. So that is another project. Apart from that, if you are talking about state-of-art technology, so we are trying to come up with a incentive scheme for capital equipment for recycling technologies in the country, which we are trying to see whether our existing spec scheme can be augmented to accommodate those product component like printed circuit board, solar panel, spent magnet, lithium ion battery, so that the 400 recyclers, authorized recycler, can apply to that incentive scheme and can upgrade their recycling facility. So that will strengthen the resource efficiency, of course. And indigenous technology, as I mentioned, will be trying to offer to our informal sectors, so that we can have better resource efficiency, so that elements which they are extracting, the yield they are providing, that can be enhanced. Then there are many other action points pertaining to MOEF or MSME ministries, skill development ministries, and also CPCB, so that we are actually following up with those agencies, because NITI Aayog has made for E-Waste, METI as the nodal agency. So that will be taking care of the integration of SRM or global supply chain guideline of promote eco design and global best practices and recycling capability to recover materials. So these are the things we are now following up with other ministry so that the policy push should ensure enter this thing. So I'm not going into details of those. This is this action points are available in NITI Aayog website also. So we are now coming to the last point. This e-waste recycling and skill set awareness may be being done for last almost 10 years in the country. There is some sensitization for this subject, but unless you are choosing the design for environment, reuse and refurbish and minimize the e-waste, so circular economy and resource efficiency cannot be obtained. So that is the one major activity our ministry is taking. Sustained awareness has to be thought of. We are again initiating one program, but it should be a participatory mode. Just leaving to the producers or manufacturers may not help. So that is why ministry is supporting this again. Now, secondary raw material, critical raw material tracking is one of the important things for development of the economy. And green design and innovation should be motivated so that all the future PLI scheme or spec scheme can be linked to that. Then finally, it is not mentioned in our circular economy action plan, but in future we should talk about the right to repair, eco-label, and other measures to promote the circular economy. That is all from my side, Dr. Pandey.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee, giving a very comprehensive view of what the ministry's action plan on circular economy looks like as submitted to NITI Aayog. And a key element, of course, is about not only awareness generation, awareness building, but also looking at mainstreaming informal sector through their training capacity building, and also developing technologies which, as you presented, I believe, will not be IPR bound and will be freely available to the recyclers, especially informal sector, as and when they would like to opt for it. A very interesting kind of submission, and also right to repair at some point of time. Maybe I'd like to ask Astrid on how European Union is looking at right to repair for the for furthering the circular economy perspective in the Union. Our next speaker represents a different sector, cement sector, and he has been associated in cement sector for very long, Mr. Ulhas Palekar, who is now global consultant on waste management and circular economy issue, policy advocacy, and co-processing of waste into alternate uses. So I'll hand it over to Mr. Palekar for his remarks in the session. Mr. Palekar.
Thank you, Dr. Pandey, and thank you, organizers of WSDS, for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views on what possibly can contribute to the cause of resource efficiency and circular economy, especially from the point of view of promoting standards and business best practices across the industry segments. You know, as Dr. Pandey mentioned, my experience has been mostly in the sector of cement, where I had the opportunity of working on utilizing wastes, different kinds of waste, hazardous, non-hazardous, from different sectors as resource materials in the cement manufacture. And while doing all this, there has been quite a few insights for me. And I feel that, those particular insights also can add value in terms of promoting the best practices that we are looking forward to in this thematic track. There have been many, points which have been brought out by my eminent speakers, previous speakers. And one most important thing that comes to my mind is that when we are talking about bringing this change of getting into resource efficiency and circular economy, most of these initiatives or most of the requirements are at the developmental stage. There's very little, I would say, where you can just pick up one and then convert it to something which to facilitate the circular economy or resource efficiency to happen. For example, Dr. Sudhir Kumar talked about the solar panel waste, what is going to happen to it. Obviously, a lot of work is required to be developed to do something on that, or even for the batteries. There are also, issues which are going to come by way of whatever, way the society is going to change. Ms. Schumacher very rightly brought out that one of the agenda is also to empower the consumers, which is very important because they are the ones who should decide, because that is how the sustainability will get built into the system. So when we are talking about bringing awareness of the consumers on these aspects, there are many different things which are going to come about. One thing that comes to my mind is that the society or the consumers are not going to like the word waste. If anybody, if any industry, if any entity is generating any waste, I'm sure they may be barred or they may be put out of business by the consumers, by the society. So the most important, one of the important approach or practice which can facilitate sustaining of the business and sustaining sustaining the business in a developmental mode. What Rachna was talking about is the industrial symbiosis. The waste, whatever waste that is getting generated, it has to get converted into a byproduct. And there has to be a use for that particular byproduct. So there is a developmental activity which is required where you are converting the waste into a byproduct. You're also building a market for that, uses for that, applications for that. A lot of research work, a lot of developmental work is required. I think effort is required towards that. The second thing is that these particular waste materials, there's enormous potential. Large amount of waste materials we are discarding into the environment, causing pollution. And since we are looking at the options of reducing pollution, I think converting this waste into resources is going to be very important, whether it is gases, liquids, or solids. Even in gases, you see the opportunity, like if the CO2 is getting liberated as a cause of concern, can CO2 be converted into a resource like algae or chemicals from CO2? That's an option which needs to be looked at. There is development required towards that. So how can you convert a liability into an asset is something that needs to be looked through this particular process of bringing some best practices or adopting some new approaches in the whole affair. We also talk about the liquid waste. We also talk about solid waste. There's enormous potential available in them to get converted into useful resource. One of the material where I had opportunity of working along with from a project that was given to me by EU RE&CE was the red mud or the bauxite residue from aluminum industry. This 1 ton of aluminum, we generally get about 3 tons of bauxite residue, and we produce in India almost about 3 million tons of aluminum, which is about 9 to 10 million tons of bauxite residue. But hardly any utilization is available for that today. But if you look at that material and if you look at its chemistry and its applicability into some applications, there are huge opportunities which are available. But we need to do some work on that. Through this particular project, I was able to get some insights into what are the options available. How do we want to look at those particular options? What needs to be done? For example, this bauxite residue has got aluminum content, iron content, then also has got alkali content. In cement manufacture, it adds value wherever there is a need for these elements. Sometimes there is a conflicting issue because alkalis are not required, but iron is required. So there is a need to look at such materials. It's a huge potential, almost 100 million tons, is already lying in our country as a resource. And if in another 7 to 8 months, 7 to 8 years time, there'll be another 100 million which will get generated. Because looking at the way we are trying to progress the economy and put focus on the aluminum industry as one of the major pillars in building our 5 trillion economy. So there is a need to work towards that and fine tune this waste material for a particular application, for a particular useful, gainful application. And that is, I think there is a need for a good collaboration, a partnership between EU and REI, EU and India, where, we can work together to build some kind of a approach to reach the stage where from the data, from the assessment that I was able to do from the scoping study, it is very apparent that almost entire quantity of red mud can be converted into a gainful resource and utilized. You need some developmental work towards that, which needs to be put in place. There is capability available in EU, there's capability available in India. I think if we put together these two, there is an opportunity for something to happen. And look at that resource, 100 billion tons is a big resource, which is getting wasted today, and that can come to a very great help, very gainful use, and that is what I think we should be looking at. So I don't want to go more into that because the topic, the time is limited, but certainly there is an opportunity. I think EU and India should look forward to working together on this particular aspect in bringing this resource into a waste source into a resource kind of a material and facilitate resource efficiency and circular economy. The third important aspect that comes to my mind after industrial symbiosis and the bauxite residue issue is the recycling parks. We talked about industrial symbiosis. I think Rachna also talked about the recycling parks, and which EU REI is looking at Rajasthan project. You see, that is going to be a very crucial thing. The waste of one, when it is likely to become a resource for somebody else through a particular processing in between, I think putting them together in a park, in an eco park, I think is one of the most important aspects, and policies need to be designed towards that so that, the industries are close by. There's a good cooperation, collaboration, and also, resolution of the issues which are going to come towards utilizing these materials as resources. So I think that is one important aspect. The second is promoting recycling of some of the materials. Today India has a distinction of, recycling plastics. I think we are one of the major recyclers of plastics in the world. However, the quality of recycling, as we see, is not as good as it can be, as it can be. And that is where I think, there's a need for something to be done. Why that is though? Because, when we are recycling plastics, we are actually not segregating them into different materials. We are not able to clean them enough so that, they can be recycled to a desired quality, virgin quality material. The capability that is available in the machinery which is produced in the country has limitations in really looking at that kind of a recycling approach. There are also problems associated with this machinery because they are designed for small and medium scale industries, whereas the machines which are available abroad, for example, the European Union has got those machineries which are larger in capacity. So it's not possible to afford for the small and medium sector to do that. So if we are able to build a recycling park where, by way of whatever model, PPP or whatever, it doesn't matter, and EU and India, together can deliberate on this aspect as to how this can be implemented. But these particular, machines, if whether they are imported or they are produced in the country, doesn't matter, but they can be employed in this recycling park where the plastics, the waste which is getting segregated, collected, and very efficient collection is happening these days. The collected ones is segregated appropriately into appropriate segments. Then they are cleaned, they are dried, and they are also, processed to an extent that the small and medium sector can then utilize it as a resource for their production of the recycled product, which is the granules or the flakes. So that is where I think there's a great, requirement where we need to convert the waste material into a resource material. By doing this, a large number of small and medium sector will be able to produce good quality plastic, resin, which could be as good as the virgin resin, and then this particular plastic material can then be utilized for recycled products. Already, there's a thought process in the ministry. Even NITI Aayog is working on that, where the plastics incorporation into the finished product is being talked about to a certain level. In EPR framework, which has been brought out by ministry, also talks about the same, that we should promote some 20-25%. So that kind of a pull, if it is put into the policy framework, there will certainly be a pull in the market to accept these materials. And if you look at the brands or producers today, everybody wants to achieve the recycled material as their goal. They don't want to really get into virgin materials and exploit the nature. So that is where I think we have huge opportunity of working towards resource efficiency and circular economy. I think I'll stop there. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Parikar, for providing overview on how key industrial sectors need to look at enhancing waste utilization, especially from sectors which are problematic and where traditionally waste utilization was not happening in past, and how some of these initiatives have been able to, for example, red mud example, where some of these problem waste types are also being able to get utilized. And it's also heartening to know that in India now we are also looking at product-to-product recycling, where acceptability of the recycled material would certainly be better. So with these few words, I'll now open the session to question and answers. And before I come to the panelists, I'm happy that our keynote speakers are still around. And the first question, which I indicated earlier also, if Astrid would be happy to address that. I know, before the lockdown, sharing economy was something which was gaining momentum in Europe. In India, we have a nascent stage. We have started now talking of sharing economy. But the point which was raised by Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee on right to repair, how does the EU look at the option?
Thank you. Well, indeed, I think for us, the right to repair is fundamental. So for us, empowering the consumers and making the consumer part of this transition is actually, as that fundamental, crucial for the whole circular economy journey to succeed. And what we have been seeing a little bit in the EU is that this right to repair is hampered by legislation that we have, and therefore we have announced that later this year we will revise our legislation, including on the sales of goods directives. I need to check for a moment what the legislation is called. So the aim would then be to encourage consumers to use products longer, and making sure that defective goods can be repaired. And what we're thinking about doing right now, we have a 2-year legal guarantee period, but that's only for new products. And if they turn out to be faulty, but not, for instance, we don't require manufacturers or sellers to repair products once the legal guarantee is expired. So that is something we would need to look at, and also we want to look at extending this guarantee, and of course also making information available at the point of sale to the consumer about where spare parts could be found, how can one repair, etc., etc. So this is in the pipeline for this year. Crucial part. And maybe one more thing on consumers, also the state is a consumer. So it's really important that we also look at green procurement a bit more and strengthen our roots in that area.
Thank you, Astrid. Very interesting. And I'll direct this to our next keynote speaker, Sudhir Kumar ji. Sudhir Kumar ji, do you feel that there would be problem from brand owners if we look at mainstreaming right to repair in the country, or if there's a need for policy intervention in this space?
Yeah, this issue was, deliberated in the e-waste side, and this was put up for the public consultation also. So we had a kind of mixed reaction from that's what the committee's members told, that we have a mixed reaction from the manufacturer's side on this issue. And maybe it requires little more deliberation and how we really set on this path. Maybe we'll further deliberate on this issue and think what are the right options for us.
So thank you so much. Very interesting.
Mr. Chatterjee, Dr. Chatterjee can also comment on that.
Sure. Very interesting remarks. Yeah.
As
Sure.
Mr. Kumar mentioned, yes, during the deliberation or having this circular economy action plan, there are lots of resistance from manufacturers. So, whatever the original form of our action plan, we have circulated to our MyGov platform and as well as our native website. A lot of reaction has come. So, we have step down, we should say, that right to repair terms we have not used in our action plan, but longer product life, of course, we have used. So almost is a similar meaning, but we are, to my mind, working in this field for last almost 15 years. In our country, we require a graded approach. So if you are talking about, sustainable product policy, where we will be defining what is sustainable product policy mean for Indian consumer or Indian manufacturers. So if you can define that, maybe that document can be upgraded, after 5 years to have the main goal of right to repair. So we should be going to strategy to policy then act. So in our country, we should have a different stages. So graded approach always will help, to my mind.
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee. So I'll next come to Rachna and Mr. Palikar in that order. Rachna, from especially implementing the resource efficiency and circular economy initiative, though you talked about some incentives which can be provided in terms of policy, in terms of finance, in terms of other measures, what do you see are current issues and challenges in implementing REI and circular economy initiatives in the Indian industry sector, especially when they are dominated by MSME to large extent. So from the policy perspective to you, Rachna, and from the industry sector perspective to Mr. Palikar, in that order. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Pandey. And I think as I was just mentioning, a lot many times we actually don't see the informal sector contribution. It's not even MSME characterized. So I think there are a lot of challenges. And in some of the deliberations, at least with few of the committees where the role of informal sector and in terms of enhancing or utilizing the secondary resources was quite a lot there in the deliberations, but somehow it's not formal. So how do you integrate this? I think this is one of the major challenges that we foresee or the issues that we see. But in terms of its implementation on the ground, I also see that whatever currently happens is also at a very city level. We call these different models which are existing, Ambedkar model and Indore model and Pune model and all. These issues have still not been undertaken at a larger scale. And I think this is where there is a lot of challenge in terms of its acceptance, in terms of creating that big shift with the formalizing the informal sector, the entire jobs and skill potential that we see, where I think that this is an issue which is there on that front. The other issue I still see is with the policy compliance, where like the kind of example that Ulhas was just mentioning, say with red mud, we still see the secondary resources being quite expensive when it comes to its utilization as compared to the primary resources. Now, this makes a lot of challenge. No one would like to invest because, of course, sustainability is an agenda which the industry is embracing, but still profits come out to be at that larger level as well. So I think that's where there is a big challenge which comes, and the kind of risk mitigation that we have looked at could be through standards or could be through working closely with some of the startups who are pretty well established in that space so that you can actually support these business models to come upfront and also try and show that where there is possibility of a greater transition. So I think these are few areas where there is a big like a move needed from the policy measures. I think the last issue, which is also still remaining, is the entire, again, leading to the compliance, is also the capacities of different stakeholders that we're talking about. So I think these three things just make a bit of a challenge on its large scale transition. But yeah, I think those challenges still need to be addressed in a full picture.
Thank you. So just quickly, before I go to Mr. Palekar, when you say recycled products, do you think to basically fast track their adoption, there should be some mandatory uptake of recycled products in the portfolio of procurement? Or I mean, any other measures which you feel would be useful initially?
Right. So yeah, I think there is this progress on sustainable public procurement that we also see, and some of the larger bulk consumers, for instance, Indian Railways. And giving a very concrete example, so Indian Railways move with the entire SUP ban, no? Or at least in terms of utilizing the available green products which are there on the market. So I think that those kind of larger bulk purchase and move would actually trigger and industrial innovation. For instance, setting up these companies or startups who are providing alternatives other than the SUPs which was available. So I think that is, of course, key. You can have a good policy, you can have an enabling action by introducing, I think, kind of, yeah, not just always incentive, but yeah, I think still at least recognizing the startups. So I think SPP, of course, is a big kind of a discussion point, and there are Ministry of Finance is already taking a lead on it. But still, and I think what Dr. Chatterjee was mentioning, if they actually really undertake this entire pilot, maybe starting with a small scale on subscription services, but there you would actually create an entire different set of industry. Maybe the larger corporates who are right now just finding it as a big bottleneck, that how would they deal with their dealers and with the entire, so I think the OEMs, once they introduce, for instance, as we have seen in the mobility space, you have a lot of startups who are coming in on the subscription side. But with COVID, of course, the uptake has been slightly impacted. But if we come with a bulk consumer like NITI trying to introduce this into the subscription services as a procurement bit, I think this is going to enable a change. And there we might see the entire startup move coming around, even on the electronics and electrical appliances, which is going to be a bit transition from the regular procurement side, which is there.
Thank you very much, Rachna. Mr. Palekar, your views from the industry's perspective?
Yeah. So, from my perspective, for the industries to really, face the challenges of improving resource efficiency or moving towards circular economy are two. The one is the comfort zone. Today we are into something, we are producing something, and then if we need to change to something else, which will require a lot of process or mindset changes. So that is a challenge, and I think there have to be some processes, policies, or other approaches which need to be put in place so that that particular challenge can be overcome. The second, of course, is that industry is for business. So if it is a business model, then this particular transformation, works much better. So the question is, how do we change this mindset from business as usual to change is better, and from a uneconomical or unviable approach to a viable approach? And that is where I think, it's not just the industry alone, but certainly, the policies would play a substantial role. How do we ensure that the industry will start moving towards the sustainable approaches? So some kind of incentives or some kind of, they could be disincentives also sometimes, but so that they will trigger some actions in moving towards, and removing the mindsets and moving towards the desired objective. So both of these things, now the business models have to be developed. They have to be shown as working. then I think industry just picks it up. You see what's the kind of revolution which tends to happen once you see that there is a business model which is available for a particular product or application. You will find, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the country. Everybody wants to really get into this particular approach of converting or getting into this mode of transformation. So I think these two approaches need to be focused. We are working together with GIZ in terms of dump site mining, and utilizing plastic. Suddenly, there's a new thought process on building a business model there, which GIZ has brought about. So if a business model of that kind emerges, the dump site, instead of becoming a liability, can become actually a resource, a gainful resource. So how do we really do that? So that's where I think, the think tanks like NITI Aayog, or, you have industry, segments, you have academicians, everybody has to put together, and institutions like yours, TERI, we should put together our thoughts and then, come out with certain, maybe we can also promote some kind of what do you call competitions, for startups, or for people to come forward with ideas which will facilitate this kind of transformation. So I think that is what I feel would facilitate this process much faster. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palika. Very clear. Dr. Sandeep Chatterjee, question to you. You discussed a lot about secondary resource material. And also, as pointed out by Astrid earlier, there's a requirement certainly for labeling, characterizing, benchmarking, not only recovered material, but also recovered, functional parts, especially in context of e-waste. So how do you think, what is our preparedness in going in that direction?
I think, Dr. Pandey, first of all, the awareness will play a vital role. But in some of the manufacturers are already claiming that they have a plastic part using in that virgin product. But there should be a laboratory who can track that, taste that their claim. So that should be in a sustainable product policy. If we are working on that from our ministry, we will be finding out some of the metrics where we can assess some company they are using the secondary raw material in their product, and we will be rating them green or some metrics. That metrics will be used for future subsidy scheme like PLI and specs, which we try to link those metrics there. So that will be a carrot approach. We will just see how they will be attracted to a certain subsidy scheme and improve their function. Some of the companies are already doing it, but these are all voluntary declaration. But there will be some laboratories to test it, whether how the SRMs are being used, what is the percentage, and based on that we can have some metrics. So we are working on that mechanism. Of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Chatterjee. And again, in the end, I thank all of our keynote speakers for the session, and also all the panelists for very informative discussion and bringing out some very new aspects and new knowledge to the deliberation on circular economy and resource efficiency approach to mainstreaming it in India. I'll not, in the interest of time, I'll not attempt, and also it's difficult to attempt thoughts of so many diverse people and diverse views into 1 or 2 minutes. So what I'll do is I'll end up here, thanking you all again, and also the participants, and hand it over to Meher for proposing vote of thanks. Meher, all yours.
Hello, sir. Thank you. So thank you for this wonderful session. I will proceed to the vote of thanks, and I would like to first, as we come towards the end of this thematic track on enabling partnerships to promote standards, business best practices on resource efficiency, I would like to sincerely thank our guest, Shri Sudhir Kumar from NITI Aayog, and Ms. Astrid Schumacher, Director DG, for their special address and for setting the context. Your inputs put forward the way for mainstreaming circular economy and resource efficiency and enabling future EU-India partnerships. I would also like to thank the key speakers for their inputs, for detailing out how the framework would look like in key sectors, providing best practices and examples for replication and scaling, and developing a way forward. And for the thought-provoking question and answer session that gave us more inputs that we need to integrate in the circular economy and resource efficiency measures. Finally, I would like to thank all the participants who have attended the session. Thank you for your time. And with that, I would close the session now. So thank you again.